Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is persistent variables. By persistent variables, I mean that you have your HTML file, you store some data in some variables, and we want the data to stay there after a refresh. That title is a little bit misleading, as we're not actually going to deal with persistent variables. It's more going to be data and APIs. The reason why I call it persistent variables is because that is the term I was searching for in Google when I first encountered this problem, when I was first starting off learning JavaScript. So I've typed that in. Hopefully somebody who's looking for this solution can find it and use this. So I'm going to give a quick use case for a problem that I was having that I needed this for. So I was working and I needed a index.html file that was in a network share, and anybody can go into the network share, open up the web page, HTML file, and be able to access data and put data in. But every time we refreshed, or I did it on my local machine and I did it on somebody else's computer, that data did not go between them. And I searched for so many different solutions. The main ones that came up was local storage and cookies, which is all well and good if you're only using the one computer, but if it's over multiple computers, that didn't work. I tried searching for how to create text files in HTML and JavaScript, so you could store your variables in text file and recall that text file every time the page loaded, but it just wasn't feasible. You'd have to open up the user would have to have a lot of input just to get that data in there, and it wasn't very good. And I found this solution which helped me to create a server and create a database and store my data in the database, and the index.html web page could pull the data from the database every time it ran, or on command, which was exactly what I needed. It's just when you read some of the Google responses and people say you need a database, you need a server, it sounds very, very daunting. So I'm going to break this down really easily and simply: how to create a server, how to create a database, and allow your index.html to receive data from the server and send it back there. And to start off, we're using Node.js, and you're going to need to download Node.js from the website, nedb-promises.org. It's really great. So Node.js is a framework which allows JavaScript to run on your local machine outside the browser, inside your terminal. A good example of this is if we bring up our terminal inside our project, type in node, and within there we can say console.log hello world, and we get that hello world. Say const variable is equal to console.log that variable, we get that yep. So that's a really good example of it. But we don't want to just type in data into our terminal. We want to create a JavaScript file, and it reads that JavaScript file, and that will be our server to serve up information to our index.html. So let's start off with creating a server.js file. Nice and easy. And if we type into there, console.log hello world, save that, and now we can run node server.js, and we get that hello world. So this is where we're going to store our server. We're going to code up our own little server. So what we want to do is we want to start by initializing a project so we can install dependencies. A dependency is pretty much somebody else's code that we can use within our project. And we want to use the dependency called Express. And Express is just going to be a very, very simple server that we can run. Okay, before we install Express, we need to initialize our project. We do that by running npm, which stands for Node Package Manager, and it'll handle all of our packages for us. So we'll do npm init. And npm init will start asking a bunch of questions, which will create a file for us, which will handle all of our information. Simple questions. What do you want your package name to be? What version of your application is this? If you don't want to deal with it, we can just do that npm init-y, and it's just going to boilerplate all that for us. And if we have a look, it's created a package.json file for us with all that information in, and it's going to house everything for us. And now we have that package.json, we can start installing our dependencies. And the one we want to run is Express. And to install that dependency, I'll say npm install Express. It's going to install that. If we have a look, it's just updated our package.json file, and it's installed that Express dependency, and it's showing it's there. We've also created another file here, which is our package.json, and it's going to handle all of our data for our dependencies. And really, we never have to touch this file. Node Package Manager will handle this for us. And our node modules is where all of our dependencies are stored. Again, we don't have to touch this. Node Package Manager will deal with all that for us. All right, so we've initialized our project. We've installed Express. Now we need to use it. And to use that, it's going to be a dependency. So we're going to create a comment called dependencies, and now we're going to bring it in by using the require function. So we're going to store Express into a variable and say require Express. There we go, we've brought Express into our server. Now to use that Express, we're going to have to use it as a function. If I can spell correctly, I never can. And we're going to bring it in under our variable called app and express as a function. It's that simple. The next step we need is our app config to configure our application. Now before I start doing this, if we go to our browser and we search for localhost, we get nothing. Because right now we're not serving up anything. We actually need to tell our server.js file to start listening for incoming connections. And to do that, we use app.listen. And now we need to give it a port. If you don't know what a port is, that's a bigger thing. You might have to look into networking, but essentially it's looking for a port number to listen on. Basic websites will usually use port 80 or 443. We're going to just go with port 80 to start with. Let's say port there, we'll save that, and now we can run our server.js file. Node server.js. Run. Can't see anything there. Actually, let's throw something in there so we can see if the server is running. So another addition we can put onto the server.listen is a callback. And we can just do something as simple as console.log server listening. If I do this correctly. There we go. So I'll save that now. Run our node server.js. There we go. We've got our server listening. Come back to our browser, search for our local host, and it's changed. Cannot get slash. We're not going to worry too much about this for now, but essentially it's saying it cannot find anything on the get method for the slash route. That'll be another video. We just want to serve up a static HTML file. Okay. So we want to serve up that static HTML file. We need to create a folder which holds all the files that we want to be viewable to the public. And to do that, we're just going to create a folder called public. We're going to put our index.html in there. All right, let's give it some boilerplate HTML. And we come back to our browser, hit refresh, and nothing. And I'm going to always do this. I'm always going to let this error out or give us a problem just so I can explain each step and how it's working. So if we come back to our server.js, let's actually throw this over here. So we can say left-hand side's our server, right-hand side's our client. So the reason for this is we're not telling our server to serve up any files. So let's use app.use. And inside here, we're going to use our Express library. We're going to say express.static, so it's going to set up a static folder, and that static folder is going to be public. So now it's searching inside that public folder for anything that needs to be served up, and most people should know servers are looking for an index.js. So now I've saved that. I'm going to come back to our browser, refresh, and still nothing. And the reason for that is the server we're running hasn't taken on any of those changes. We need to restart the server. So we'll cancel out of that, run that server again, server listening, come back, refresh, and there's our page. Nothing on it. Let's actually throw something on there. Hello world. Come back here, refresh, and we've got hello world. We have our HTML file that we're serving up. Now that's the first step. So you can store this server.js and HTML anywhere on your network or your local machine, as long as it's running your server. And then anybody can access it. They can just go to that machine's IP address and it'll come up. They don't need to actually go to a network share or anything like that to open up the index.html. They can, but they don't have to. It's just a lot easier just to, in the browser, type in the person's IP address, where it's been stored, and there it is. Okay, the very next thing we want to work with is data on our server to get to our client. So let's say we're a fresh person coming in and we want the web page to load, and we automatically get all the data that's already stored. And what data are we going to store? People. We are going to create an array of objects of people. Let's say it's me, Toby, and my age is 38. So if somebody loads the page, we want them to get all the data inside that people variable. Let's come over here, accept our script tag. I want to create a function. Alright, let's call this function get data from server. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the fetch API, which is built into JavaScript, and we're going to say search on the API route. So right now that's not going to do anything. We need to store it into a variable. So let's say const fetch response is equal to fetch/API. I save that. I refresh it. Let's open up our terminal so we can see anything. And we're getting an error. Favicon. I hate this stupid favicon. Let's just get rid of that. Link hash shortcut icon. There we go. Alright, so refresh you again. Check out our page source. Forgot something. This is a really simple thing that I didn't mean to forget on purpose. But we've got this function and we're not calling the function. So let's say init get data from the server. Alright, let's run that again. Restart, and right there we come up with an error. Can't get anything from /API on localhost. So the reason for that is we are saying get any data on the /API route. We look over here, I don't see a /API anywhere on here. So let's create that now. So this is going to be what's called a route, and we're going to use our Express app, and we're going to tell it the method that we want to use, and the method that we want to use is actually specified in the error, get. So we're going to say app.get, and the next, what do we want to get? It's going to be /API. So we're saying the client HTML file wants to get data from /API, and here we're going to be listening for anybody requesting data from /API. Now, in our callback, it's going to take two things, request and response. Our request is anytime our HTML file, or the client side, is requesting data from the server. Our response is going to be anytime we want to send data back to the client. So let's just start with, we've opened it up, run our anonymous function, and let's just say console.log request. So what's going to happen is, as soon as this server here is requesting something from the server, it's going to log out in our server-side console. Somebody's made a request. So let's refresh you. Come back over here. And actually, I just meant to show you this. It's still coming up with the error. The reason for that is, same as I told you before, we've made a change in our server, but we haven't restarted our server. So let's restart that again. Refresh, and that error is gone away. We come over to our server, we've got that request sitting right there from the console logs. We know something's been requested. Okay, let's fix one little problem we've got first. Well, not really a problem, more of an annoyance, where every time we make a change, we have to restart the server, and that's getting a bit annoying. So what we're going to do is we're going to install another npm dependency, which is going to automatically restart our server for us. But we don't want this to happen all the time. We just want it to be while we're running in development mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to run npm install, just like with Express, and this package is going to be called nodemon. Nodemon is going to automatically refresh our server for us. And because we don't want this to be a normal dependency, we only want it to be a development dependency, we're going to say /dev install. We go back to our package.json to check out our dependencies, and it's not one of our dependencies. It's a development dependency. So if we come back to our console now and type in nodemon server.js, you'll see it's coming up with some writing first before the server started. So that means anytime I save, it automatically restarts our server for us, which is going to make it a lot easier. All right, next thing. So on our client side, going back, we hit refresh, and we've got a request there. Let's just make this look a bit better. So we'll say request, and we'll say request for all people. So when we refresh you again, we get request for all people. Let's actually make this route look a little bit nicer so we know what it is. /API is one thing. Let's say get all people, and we can just add that to this get all people, make sure that still works. Refresh you. What did I say? Oh, there we go, didn't save that side. Refresh. There we go, request all people. But we have a problem. I don't know whether you noticed before, it hasn't popped up yet, but an error has been popping up. And the reason for that is our client, our index.html, has been waiting for our server to give us something back, but it hasn't. So it's been throwing an error. So we need to send something back to the client. And we want to send down that people. So we want to say response, because as I said, everything that we get from the client will be on request. Anything that we're sending back to the client will be on response. So response.json. And we're going to send our data down in JavaScript object notation. And what do we want to send back down? People. Come back to our client. And look, there's that error I was telling you about, because it's waiting for a response and never go on. So if we refresh you now, we don't get that. Have a look there, we got those two requests. So we're getting that data, but we're not doing anything with it. So let's console.log fetch response. And if we have a look at that now, a refresh, there we go, we've got something. Promise. What's that? That's not our data. If you haven't dealt with promises before, essentially what is happening now is we're requesting data from the server, and the server isn't as quick as your local JSON. It's got to wait for it. So what's happening is, rather than the server sending back the data, it's sending back a promise, which says, I promise I will send this data once I've got it ready for you. And JavaScript, especially this JavaScript here, it's running that, it's getting the promise, and then it's running this. It's not waiting for the promise to be fulfilled. So what we need to do is we need to tell our client-side JavaScript to wait until that promise has been fulfilled. To do that, we simply add the keyword await there. But we notice we've got little squiggly lines saying there's something wrong with it. And the reason for that is because await can only be used in an asynchronous function. And all we need to do to fix that is add async in front of that function. Now let's save that, come back to our browser, refresh, and we're not getting that promise anymore. We're getting all the raw data, the URL, the status, the headers. We don't want all that information. We just want the information from people. Now what we need to do is we need to pass that. We actually send that data down in JSON. So we want to pass that data as JSON. So we can say const JSON is equal to our fetch response dot JSON. Now let's console.log that JSON. Come back to our client, refresh, and oh, we've got another promise. This one's on line 16. line 16 was this one. So it's having a problem with its JSON. Just the same problem we had up here. And to fix that, we told it to await. Just like waiting from a server, converting a JSON can sometimes take time, so we tell that to await. Come back to our browser, refresh, and now we have that data, that person right there. So what we're doing is we're asking the server, give me everything that's on /API/getPeople. So the server's listening and it sees, oh, somebody's requesting that. I'm going to console.log, putting it down there, and then I'm going to respond back in JSON format those people. We've got those people, we're storing in fetch response, then we're passing that data as JSON, we're storing in JSON, and then we're viewing that. Pretty nice and easy. Okay, so we're getting data from the server. That's just like opening up a fresh HTML file and getting all the data that you need from previous sessions. But what if we want to send data to the server? So let's do that now. We will say function send data to server. All right, let's run that. Send data to server. And to send data to the server, we want to do pretty similar to this. So we're going to say const fetch response is equal to, well, let's call it fetch data. Fetch data is equal to fetch, and let's send it to API/send new person. All right, just like up there, we need our await because we're waiting for it. Just because we've got our await, we need our async. There we go. So let's just leave it at that for now. We know we still need this other stuff, but let's check out our server up here. So we can wait for that. So we can say app.get/API/send new person. Again, with our request and our response. Let's say console.log request new person sent. All right, so now we'll come back to our browser, we'll refresh you, new person sent, but we're not sending any data. There's lots of different ways to send data. The main way that we're going to use, and you should probably use for just sending and receiving variables, is post. And post is a method similar to get. So what we want to do is we want to use this route but change the method to post, and then we also want to send it some data. And to do that, we're going to create some options, which is going to be an object. Okay, so first thing we're going to need is a method for that fetch. We're going to assign a post to that method. The next thing we're going to need is our headers for that post. We're going to assign what type of headers we're sending, which will be the content type. And the content type we're going to send will be JSON. So application/JSON. So that'll be the headers, so that way the server can determine what type of data we're sending and assign it accordingly. The last thing we need to do is the data we actually want to send up there, and it's going to be the body. Now, right now we don't actually have any data, so let's create some data. Let's say person, and we're going to give it a new person. The name will be, I don't know, John Smith. John Smith. The age will be 100. And that's the data we want to send up there. So the data we're sending up can't be sent up in a plain object. We need to actually convert it into a string from JSON. And then we can send it up. So we're going to use JSON.stringify and pass in that person. All right, so we've got our options. We've got our method changing our get to a post. We've got our headers set up, and we have our body, which is holding our data. And now we want to append that to our fetch request. Awesome. Now over here in our server, we actually want to view what it is. So let's come up here, const data is equal to request, because remember everything that comes from index.html will be on request, dot body, which is where our data is stored. And now let's just append onto the end of this new person sent, let's say colon, and we're going to say data to see the data. So let's refresh that page. Refresh. So now we've got a problem. So what we're doing is we've got the same problem as before, but instead of get, it says post there. So it's looking for a method called post down a server, which doesn't exist. So we need to change our get to a post. Now refresh that again. No error. We come have a look over here. Request new person sent, but undefined. There's no person there. And the reason for that is, by default, our server is going to block everything from the client unless we specify that we want it. So what we're wanting to do is accept JSON from the client, and that's going to be part of our app.use up here. So let's expand on this, and we can say express, because express is going to handle all of our server-side stuff. Express.json, so we're going to accept that JSON. It's that simple to accept that JSON now. Now if we refresh this page, look at that, request new person sent. There's our John Smith, age 100. Awesome. Now what we want to do is we want to send that person and store it in our people variable. So let's say people.push, because we're pushing to our array, data. Amazing. So now let's refresh that page. Refresh. Come back here. We've received that person. So now let's just look on our client side, and we don't want to send anything anymore. Let's receive it. Come back here, refresh, and look at this. We have both those people now. As many times we refresh, we're always going to get those two people there. So that stored that session, those variables persistently for us over refreshes. We can access that from different machines, and those variables are always going to be there. We can add new variables to it with this other function there. Okay, we do still have a bit of a problem here. I don't know whether you saw just before when we first did that refresh that we got an error. And the reason for that, I'll just refresh that page, adding new person, getting the new person, because an error is going to pop up after a while. And for the reason for that is we've got down here await fetch, and it's waiting for a response from the server, and the server's not sending anything back to the client. So it's actually going to throw an error saying I've been waiting and this hasn't popped up. You can't just remove that because it's still going to, you can't remove the await because it's still going to be waiting for that response. So, no error still, that's fine. So what we actually need to do is we need to say response.end, and that means the server is now telling the client, you don't need to wait for this anymore. Still no error, that's fine, but you'll just have to take my word for it. There will be an error there because the server's not responding to the client. Alright, so let's just actually say after this, we get the data from, we sent the data to the server. Let's console.log that again. So let's run this. Oh, there we go. Refresh that, and it's getting those two people. Now let's add another person into there. Let's say John Smith, Jane Doe, age 50. Come back to our client, refresh it. And now we've got 3. Amazing. Let's say another person comes along and they're just fresh, receiving that data. We're going to constantly get that array of 3. Alright, very cool. Still have a problem though. And the problem is that we refresh our server now because we've made a change. We come back over here, we refresh, and it's gone down to an array of 1. Just that one that's stored, hard-coded into the server. It didn't keep any of the ones we sent up from the client. And it's always going to do that because variables inherently lose when you refresh. That was the exact problem we were having with this. We've just moved the problem from our client side to our server side. And this is where we move into databases. So a database is going to store all of our information somewhere else persistently for us. There's a lot of different databases. I like to use MongoDB, but there's a lot of little nuances and connections and schema and models to get all that going. And we just want to keep this very nice and simple. And to make it nice and simple, we are going to use nedb. It's a very, very lightweight, easy databasing tool. So to install nedb onto our server, just like Express, npm install nedb. Nedb, that's fine just there, but it uses callbacks and it's a bit annoying and a little bit unintuitive. I like using nedb-promises, which is an offshoot of nedb, which allows you to use async await. Okay, so we're going to run that. Cool, server's restarted because we've installed new packages. If we come back to our package.json, now we have that nedb-promises in there. Okay, so to bring in our new dependency that we've just installed, go const database is equal to require nedb-promises. Okay, so now we've got our database in there, but we don't actually have a database set up. We want to create a database and we're going to call it people, just to replace what we've already got. So let's say database config. Now we're going to say const people is equal to a new database, which is a new database up there. So this requires nothing to create the database, but it won't be persistent. To make it persistent, we need to give it two options inside an object. The first name is a file name. And we'll give it the file name database.db. The next one is auto load, which is making sure it loads the database every time we refresh. So now when we save that, we have a look over here, that database.db file has just appeared. So that's where it's going to be storing all of our data. So now we've already got our people variable there for our database. We've got people everywhere else. Let's run that. It's going to fail, but let's run it anyway. So we want to not get the data. Let's send it new data because there is no data there. Okay, save that. Go back to our client side. Refresh. We've got errors. The reason for that, there you go, can't push. So we're down here, we can't push the data into people because it's no longer an array, it's a database. And luckily for us, nedb is actually very, very easy. We can just say insert instead of push. So let's come back here, we'll refresh. We have a look in our database.db file. We've now got that Jane Doe sitting right there. Name, Jane Doe, age 50. We've also got this other little area called ID. That's essentially giving us a unique identifier just in case we've got two people with the same name. We can tell them apart. It'll automatically be added. Don't have to worry about it at all. Alright, so we've got that data now. We've sent it to the database, but if you remember at the end there, it's saying get data from server, and we go back to our client side, didn't get anything. It got this weird little object there. And the reason for that is up here where we're saying send people, we can't actually send it the entire database because it doesn't know what to do with it. So we need to actually pull data from the database and send that. Let's say const results is equal to people.find. Now that's going to pull all the data from database and store it into result. Type into there results, and it's going to pass that down. Problem we have right here, I'm just going to show you before this one does error, is pulling data from databases takes longer than other variables and arrays, so we need to tell it to await. Just like before, because we've got await in there, we need to denote this as an asynchronous function. So we're going to say async. So now, actually, rather than sending data to the server, let's just pull data from the server. So now when we refresh you, we're getting that array. Jane Doe, age 50. Let's throw somebody else into there now. Let's say John Doe is 100. Let's refresh you. It's sent the data to the server, so we come over here. New person, John Doe, age 100. Refresh you. Oh, we've just sent it twice by me refreshing it twice. That was kind of stupid. John Doe, Jane Doe, John Doe. So we come back to our server. Yep, we sent that data twice because I refreshed it. Only because it's doing that. We have a look in our file. We've got our Jane Doe and our 2 John Does. We're going to remove one of those John Does. By doing that, hit save. Let's just run this again and take note. We have 2 inside there, but when we refresh, we've still got 3. The reason for that is because we changed our database, but we haven't restarted our server. And we pull data in from the database every time the server restarts. So because we changed the data in the database, we have to restart the server. Now if we refresh it, we've got those 2 entries there. Very nice and easy. So there's a couple of caveats to this. You can create as many GET requests and POST requests as you want. And that right there is just pulling down all the people. Okay, so let's give it something else on here. So let's get rid of our database. Let's forget about our client side for the moment, and let's just play around with some of the nedb functions that you might need. So let's just create an anonymous asynchronous function here, which is going to fire as soon as I start. So log true. Yep, that fires as soon as I start. All right, let's just send a little bit of data to our database. Let's say const array is equal to fname. What am I doing? Fname John, lname Smith, age 100. It's not obvious. Fname's first name, lname's last name. Let's say Jane Doe, she's 50. Let's give my name Toby Stokes, 38. Nas Stokes, 37. Alright, then we can say people dot insert. Actually, that won't work because it's going to do everything. Let's just do a little for loop. So let's say ar.for each I, and we'll say people.insert I, and that's going to insert all those into our database. So now we've got all that data in our database. We want to pull data out. So some of the methods we can use, const result is equal to people.find console.log result. And let's just say you're wanting on your client side to receive everything. .find will get you everything if I use the await keyword. It got us everything. Now, .find will also find everything, but with filters. Let's say lname is equal to Stokes. It's found everybody with the last name is equal to Stokes. You can use that. You can use multiple filters. You can use age is greater than or equal to 50 and find everybody that's older than them. All right, so that's how you get everything or multiple responses for one. Now let's say we only want one response. We can say find one, and it's only just going to give us a single object rather than an array of objects, and it's just giving us the first index with the surname Stokes. We can say fname is Toby. And there you go. You can use this if you're searching for individual variables. You can use this if you search for individual people, or multiple variables. Essentially, you just have to replace this find up here with your filters or find one. And that is pretty much everything. Hope this helps somebody.